Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome back to our Queen's Gambit decline studies. So in this studies we have seen some great openings and great defenses after the first moves d4, d5 and c4. So here in the playlist of our Queen's Gambit decline we have covered really the beautiful Taraj defense, Chigorin defense, Rago's defense and many more. And today I wanted to show you really a specific opening line that's possible in the Harrwitz attack of the Queen's Gambit decline, and we have covered already the Harrwitz attack. It was our first study in the Queen's Gambit decline, but still I wanted to show one specific line that happened to me now many times, and in my opinion this line that black is basically playing is not so good. So that's why in this video I wanted to show you how to punish really a careless play by black. In my opinion you see now this line very often, but it's not so good what black is doing. So that's why, as I said, we have to know how to counterplay this idea. So in this video I wanted to show really a beautiful opening trap that's possible in the Harrwitz attack for white in the Queen's Gambit decline. So let's see now what's all about. So we're playing with the white pieces, we're playing with the move d4, our opponent's response is d5, and now we play the Queen's Gambit with the move c4. After e6 we're now in the Queen's Gambit decline, and after knight to f3, knight to f6 and knight to c3 we're now in the 3 knights variation. So now after bishop to e7 we are playing this Harrwitz attack move, bishop to f4, very important move. So now after castling we fix now the center with the move e3, and now our opponent is playing aggressively with the move c5, and this is the way to go. So far black is playing really, in my opinion, the optimal line. After move c5 we have a certain dynamic position in the center of the board, and when you have dynamics then of course you want to clarify the center and be careful what you're doing. You don't want to be left here with an isolated pawn, because when you maybe have an isolated pawn it's of course a structural weakness. It can be a weakness for the whole game. So that's why we're playing now the move d takes c5. Now we're threatening in some lines. I would not recommend you immediately to play c takes d5, but maybe later c takes d5 could be an opportunity. Then of course black could be left with an isolated d pawn, which is of course many times also a strategic disadvantage. But so far after bishop to c5 I'm not recommending you here to take out the pawn on d5. This line is playable, has been also played in top grandmaster level, but my favorite line is here to play the move queen to c2, delaying here the situation in the center of the board. We don't want to also play with our bishop here, because if you play something like bishop to d3 then your opponent will play d takes c4. You lost another tempo because you have already played with the bishop once, and now the queens will be probably traded off. So in my opinion this is a too drawish line. You didn't gain so much, I think, in this particular line. So that's why with the move queen to c2 we're delaying the bishop's move, and we get out of the d-file attack, because now probably the queens will not be traded off. So that's why we have more chances maybe to win the game. So now black continues with the move knight to c6. We're playing a3, very important move, controlling the square b4, and now black is going to play many times this idea queen to a5. This idea is clear. Black wants to play knight to b4. You cannot pick up the knight on b4 because of the tensions on the a file. So you see, if knight to b4 happens, we play a takes b4, and then the rook is hanging on a1. So this is not possible. So that's why the best move here is to play rook to d1, getting out of the a file mess, and now your opponent will probably play something like rook to e8. Although, as I recommended also in one of my studies, in my opinion here the best move for black is actually to retreat, to play simply bishop to e7, and this should be pretty solid also for black. Although probably c takes d5, c takes d5 could lead again into an isolated pawn for black. If ever that happens, also black has some chances when the pawns are traded off in the center of the board. Then black has also great activities with the light square bishop. So in my opinion this should be also a good solid position for black. So here after move rook to d1 your opponent could, as I said, play the move rook to e8. He's hoping to get some kind of an activity against the king on e1, because the king is not secured so far. So that's why now there are certain possibilities here by black. So now my recommendation is to play knight to d2. This move is preventing also some wild ideas of knight to e4, and also we are threatening in some occasions knight to b6, creating a beautiful fork against the queen and the bishop. So now our opponent could try maybe this move e5, and now the fun starts. Be careful now what you're doing. This is now really wild play. This is now really aggressive what's going to happen. So we have discussed, as I said, so far on my YouTube chess channel also this line. Now we play bishop to g5, and you see now with the attack against the knight on f6 we are controlling also further the d5 square. So that's why you see also the knight to d2 move is very important, because we have a certain flexibility with our knight to play freely. We can also play knight to d5. There are no threats of queen to of the queen, so the queen is not creating any attacks against the king on e1. So now with the move bishop to g5, we are basically battling it out for the d5 square. So now comes the dirty part. Knight to d4. Be careful. Don't take out the knight on d4. After e takes d4, look at this. E takes d4, the e file gets open, the pawn is rolling, so this is not possible. Even if you play something like bishop to e2, then d takes e3, look at this. This is game over here for white already. So that's why we have to be careful. After knight to d4, we play queen to b1, and now our opponent is probably going to play bishop to f5. Now we play, again, a calm move, bishop to d3. Don't panic here. Nothing went wrong so far in this position. After bishop to d3, queen to d3, opponent is playing now knight to e4, attacking now the bishop on g5, and it's now time to play the correct answer. Here my recommendation is to play knight to d5. Leave the bishop unprotected, because after knight to g5, we have now this resource. b4, pardon me, attacking the queen and the bishop, creating this beautiful fork. And now comes the new line that I wanted to show today. I've seen now many times black playing the move queen to a3, and it's quite tempting. It seems like a logical move, because after queen to a3, knight to c2 is going to happen, and then we have the fork. Black will get out with the bishop, and maybe black has good chances here in the game. So actually it's quite tempting, but this is now the dirty part. Actually we can trap now black with a beautiful idea. We will simply pick up the queen. We'll play black's line. We're saying, show me what you got here, because after knight to c2, we play king to e2, and after knight to a3, we pick up now the bishop on c5. And again, it seems so that nothing spectacular is going on. Two knights are on the board for both sides. Pretty much the material is equal, but there is a problem for black. Black doesn't have escape routes for the knight. Notice when the knight comes on c2, it cannot escape on d4. Notice also the knight cannot escape on b5, because the pawn on c4 is controlling b5. So the next couple of moves, we're trying to somehow trap the knight. And also we have to say, this knight on g5 is not really on the optimal square, so it can be also kicked away with potential moves like h4. Also notice that the knight on d2 is controlling also the square e4. So both of the knights by black are a little bit endangered, and now we have to use this moment. It seems, so as I said, that this should be a drawish line, and we have to also say it. If you don't make anything out of this position, if you don't trap the knight, then of course black should be even slightly better because of the healthier pawn structure. Black has here two connected pawns. In the next couple of moves, you can maybe try to attack your c5 pawn, and this could be a problematic position for white. But if you know what you're doing, this should be a winning position for white, because actually what your opponent could maybe do is here this kind of an idea. Rook from a to c8. He's trying to attack the pawn on pawn on c5. So also notice there are certain threats always. If you play something like a rook from e to c8, then there is always the possibility of a fork on e7, and here also there is a certain possibility of the fork on c7. So we have certain threats also with our knight here on d5. So that's why let's see first this idea, rook from a to c8. If that happens, then we play rook to a1. Look how endangered really this knight is. Your opponent can maybe try this kind of an idea, knight to c2, but now we attack the knight, and where is this knight going to go? As I said, this is really wild. Your opponent is already losing the game because the knight is paralyzed. He could maybe try some wild ideas, of course, of knight to d4, but after e takes d4, we play simply king to d3, and this should be a solid game. The king is perfectly fine here. No good checks are possible. We're controlling also the square f4. Maybe later knight to e6, knight to f4 could happen, but this knight is perfectly fine. We have the a file attack in the next couple of moves. This rook will be included, so nothing dramatic. This is winning for white for sure. So after move b takes c5, your opponent doesn't have to play rook from a to c8. What he could do is, of course, rook from a to d8. The idea about this move is that in certain lines, if you play something like rook to a1, then there is this problem: knight to c4, and then rook to d5. This is black's, of course, plan. And again, you're probably not satisfied with this position because you didn't get anything. Maybe you can pick up this pawn, later this one, but actually this is again a drawish line. The black gets out of this mess. So that's why after move rook from a to d8, you have to play now a beautiful knight to c7. And there are certain things that your opponent can do now. He can play maybe the move rook to e7, but now after move rook to e7 attacking the knight, now comes the really the stunning part. Now we have the dirty knight to b1. This is beautiful. The knight is hanging and also the rook is hanging. Look at this. If your opponent picks up of course the knight on b1, then there is a checkmate. Rook to d8, and the game should be over. And also the same thing happens, for instance, after rook to d1. Again, we play rook to d1. Your opponent doesn't have time to pick up here the knight on c7. He could maybe try h6, getting out of this mess. But now we play knight to d5, a counter attack against the rook. The rook has to step back, and then the next move will pick up the knight. So this is very, really beautiful. So see, this move rook to e7 is actually not working. So as we said, we play knight to b1. Even if your opponent plays something like, I don't know, maybe rook to d7, then we can pick up still the knight. It's nothing spectacular because the king is controlling the square d1, so we have a great protection on the d file. Again, your opponent doesn't have time to pick up the knight because the rook on d8 will be hanging. Again, it will be a beautiful checkmate. So as I said, instead of this move rook to e7, your opponent after knight to c7, of course, could play maybe the move rook to f8. This seems much better. And hoping here, your opponent is hoping to play something like knight to c2, maybe knight to b4 and get out of this mess. Maybe knight to a6 or maybe knight to c6 are defensive ideas. But now we play rook to a1 anyway. Our opponent could maybe try here this kind of an idea, rook to d7, but now we play h4, and this is now the stunning moment. That's what I meant in the beginning. The knight on g5 is not also on a good square. Notice when we play h4, the knight on d2 is controlling the e4 square, but also the knight on c7 is controlling the e6 square. So black doesn't have time to escape with one of these knights. We'll simply pick up the knight, and then we'll afterwards pick up this one. So after move h4, your opponent could try maybe knight to c2, attacking the rook. We attack now here the b4 square. We're not allowing here our opponent to get back to b4. Now the knight has to be taken. We play now h takes g5, and the only defensive move that your opponent has here is now the move a5. He's hoping here to get the knight on b4. He is hoping to get the knight back into the defense. Now we pick up the pawn on a5, and now after move knight to b4, we play rook to b1, attacking the knight. The knight has to step back, and now after rook to b5, your opponent has to play now knight to d8, and now after a couple moves we can play knight to e4, knight to d6, and this should be, in my opinion, a completely winning game here for white. Still, it's of course an endgame, but we have here extra material. Our pieces are much more active. This rook is paralyzed, so as I said, we're controlling the spaces. The g5 pawn is very annoying. In the next couple moves, as I said, we'll simply play here knight to d6, and we'll pick up this annoying pawn on b7. So this should be completely winning here for white. So this is the trap. As I said, let's go back to this critical moment. After b6 c5, your opponent has to play here, I think, rook from a to d8, knight to c7, very important. He has to step back to f8. Every other solution is losing. Now we play rook to a1. He has to play rook to d7, counterattack, but now h4. As we said, knight to c2, rook to a4, controlling b4. We're not allowing him to escape. Now he plays rook to c7. We pick up the knight, and now after a5, okay, he can hang on to this position for a while, but this is still winning for white for sure. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed the studies. I really have to say this will happen to you. Your opponent will get a little bit greedy with this idea. After queen to a3, he will say, okay, I get this fork, I'll get out with my bishop, I get out with my piece, but actually this is quite spectacular. Actually, white is winning here for sure. So, okay, this is now our study. If you want to see more about the Harrwitz attack and also about the Queen's Gambit decline, check out our whole playlist. Here's the link of our Queen's Gambit decline playlist. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.